Hello, history friends. This is the chapter 29 and 30 test. I'm going to go ahead and read this. You are welcome to pause in between each question, so that way you have time to answer and think about it, and then hit play when you're ready. First question, which statement best describes Vietnamization? A system of withdrawing U.S. troops and letting South Vietnamese take more of a role in fighting, a policy of including other nations in the fighting of Vietnam, or a policy of not letting U.S. troops fight in extreme temperatures. 4 students were killed where during a protest over U.S. involvement in Cambodia and Vietnam? Illinois State University, Kent State University, Kentucky State University. The U.S. and North Vietnam signed the blank to end the Vietnam War. The Paris Peace Accords, Let There Be Peace on Earth, or the official Vietnam Surrender Letter. What happened after the U.S. left South Vietnam? North Vietnam and South Vietnam stopped fighting and lived peacefully as neighbors. South Vietnam joined Vietnam in an attack against the U.S., or North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam and captured Saigon. Blank was the president during the end of the Vietnam War and during the Watergate scandal. Woodrow Wilson, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon. The scandal known as the Watergate scandal centered on the Nixon administration's attempt to do what? Open up communication with China, cover up a burglary of the DNC, which is the Democratic National Committee headquarters, or distribute a portion of federal power to state and local governments. President Nixon refused to give up what that would prove if he was innocent or guilty? Phone calls, tapes, written documents. Nixon knew he would be blank, so he did blank. He knew he would be beaten in the next election, so he did not run. He knew he would be impeached, so he resigned. He knew he would be resigned, so he impeached. Problems with the Middle East led to what shortage in the U.S. in the 1970s? A gas shortage, a food shortage, or a water shortage? America celebrated its blank in 1976, meaning it had been established 200 years ago. Its millennium, bicentennial, or first birthday. The moral equivalent of war is how President Carter described the nation's battle against inflation, unemployment, the energy crisis. The Shah of Iran had lost power because he allowed what types of ways in Iran? Islamic ways, Western or democratic ways, or violent ways? Who took over in Iran after the Shah was forced out of power? Al-Qaeda, Muammar al-Gaddafi, or Ayatollah Khomeini? Iran took American hostages to protest when blank came to the U.S. for medical treatment. The Shah, the Ayatollah, or President Carter? In exchange for releasing 52 American hostages, revolutionaries in Iran demanded that the U.S. do what? Remove all troops from the Middle East, hand over the much-hated Shah of Iran, or supply Iran with military and financial aid. Soviet troops invaded blank in 1979. Invaded Iran, invaded Afghanistan, or invaded Austria? The U.S. and other countries did not attend the blank in the Soviet Union in 1980. The Olympics, the SALT II talks, or the annual trade conference? Who was the oldest person to become U.S. president at that time? On the day he was inaugurated, the 52 Iran hostages were released. Is that George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, or Ronald Reagan? During Reagan's presidency, federal spending increased most for defense and military, urban mass transit, or environmental protection? The main purpose of the tax cuts that Reagan supported was to do what? Raise interest rates, stimulate private investment, or allow women to leave the workplace. In an attempt to fill the Supreme Court with conservatives, Reagan nominated who? The first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court. Was that Peggy Noonan, Geraldine Ferraro, or Sandra Day O'Connor? What exploded into flames 73 seconds after liftoff on January 28, 1986? Apollo 13, the Challenger, or the Mars rover? In the 1980s, Americans charged who, the leader of Libya, with terrorist attacks such as airport bombings, firing at planes over international waters, and the killing of Americans? Was that Gaddafi, the Ayatollah Khomeini, or Al-Qaeda? The scandal, which involved accusations of President Reagan selling weapons to terrorists in Iran, was known as the blank scandal. The corruption scandal, the conniving scandal, or the Contra scandal? Which best describes the effect of Mikhail Gorbachev's leadership on the Soviet Union? The country immediately grew more prosperous with the economy soaring. More openness was allowed, including the freedom of the press and the government, and the government controlled the economy less than before. Or advances were taken greatly to increase the scope of the Soviet Union's military, including requiring all men 16 and older to enlist. Which of the following does not describe an event that was part of the end of the Cold War? 14 non-Russian republics declared their independence from the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall came down, and East Germany and West Germany combined to become one democratic nation. Cuba got rid of its communist government and elected a new democratic president. Or several European nations, including Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania, stopped being communist. Who was elected president in the U.S. in 1988? His son later also became president. Is that Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, or William Bill Clinton? Who became the nation's first African-American top military officer? George H.W. Bush, Colin Powell, or Douglas Wilder? Okay, my friends, the next part is the document-based reading. It says, in 1976, Jimmy Carter had been nominated as the Democratic candidate for president. He was full of hope and confidence. In this part of his acceptance speech for the nomination, he describes his vision for America in 1976. He says, 1976 will not be a year of politics as usual. It can be a year of inspiration and hope, and it will be a year of concern, of quiet and sober reassessment of our nation's character and purpose. A year when voters have confounded the experts, and I guarantee you that it will be the year when we give the government of this country back to the people of this country. There is a new mood in America. We have been shaken by a tragic war abroad and by scandals and broken promises at home. Our people are searching for new voices and new ideas and new leaders. There is a fear that our best years are behind us, but I say to you that our nation's best is still ahead. Our country has lived through a time of torment. It is now a time for healing. We want to have faith again. We want to be proud again. We just want the truth again. It is time for the people to run the government and not the other way around. It is the time to honor and strengthen our families and our neighborhoods and our diverse cultures and customs. I have never had more faith in America than I do today. We have an America that is busy being born, not busy dying. I see an America on the move again, united, a diverse and vital and tolerant nation, entering our third century with pride and confidence, an America that lives up to the majesty of our Constitution and the simple decency of our people. According to President Carter, how was 1976 different from past election years? During the presidency, he will end the Vietnam War, or this is not a year of politics as usual, but instead a year full of hope. What did Carter say had shaken Americans? War? Scandals? Broken promises? All of the above. What 3 things did Carter say that the American people want? Please mark all 3. Faith, anger, truth, guilt, pride. Okay, my friends, our last part is a cartoon analysis. Let's take a look here. We've got a person hanging on to 2 tapes that says, "I am not a crook." Which president is depicted in the cartoon? Is that Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, or Ronald Reagan? And what scandal is being depicted in the cartoon? The XYZ affair, the Teapot Dome scandal, or the Watergate scandal? When you're finished, please hit submit.